Welcome to Variations in Health 4. In this video, we're going to be looking at the integumentary unit, which is focused really on burns. The use of this in general, other than working on a burn unit, is that there's a lot of good review in this unit on fluids and light shifts. So it's got a universal use as well as a specific use. And then this video will be covering questions 1 to 4 from our itinerary. So if we start with number 1, where Mary is rescued from a house fire, why does she have uh, carbon monoxide poisoning? What does that mean? Well, got a fairly simple explanation here of how the carbon monoxide displaces O2 on the hemoglobin molecules. And that has obvious issues for O2 delivery to tissues. The working theory that I have now in the hyperbaric chamber is that the life of the carbon monoxide is shortened in a hyperbaric chamber. And so that could help O2 reattach to hemoglobin, and the high flow of the O2 itself in such a chamber helps the O2 be delivered to the tissues. So that's just kind of interesting points to know. What does a hyperbaric chamber do, and how does that work with carbon monoxide inhalation? So question number 2. So imagine there's a fire downstairs, you're upstairs, there's hot smoke coming up. You breathe in that hot smoke and you can understand that it's hot. So in the upper airways, they get burned. That's actually a thermal injury. It could be that the smoke cools down by the time it reaches the lower respiratory area. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But if it does cool down enough sufficiently, then you will be looking at the irritation from the smoke and chemicals that are burning. I mean, if you've ever smelt burning plastic, you can imagine when a house is burning, all the things that are burning and how toxic those fumes can be. So upper airway, we would expect definitely a thermal injury if the smoke is hot enough. And then if the smoke cools down enough, we'd at least expect a chemical irritating type injury lower down. Both are going to cause tissue irritation and inflammation. And kind of what I just said here is explained over here. Question number 3. Explain 3 ways in which an electrical burn could disrupt the normal cardiovascular functioning in the body. So in your PowerPoint here, we've got a little picture of chemical burn. Or sorry, there's thermal. Thermal's heat. So this is talk, we didn't show a picture for the first couple of questions. Thermal's heat, it's the type of burn that most people are familiar with. It's the type of burn you can get just around your house. You can have a, touch the stove. That's a thermal burn, for example. Finger in the candle, too close to the candle. That's a thermal burn. So these are the actual thermal burns here in your PowerPoint. And then the next one is the electrical burn. The electrical burn can cause thermal injuries as well. So in other words, injury caused by heat, because electrical burns can involve fire and they can involve heat. But they also have another element to them, and that's the electricity itself. And that's what brings us to the question we're on now. Question number 3. 3 ways in which an electrical burn could disrupt the normal cardiovascular functioning in the body. So because it's electricity running through the body, it can disrupt the pacemaker cell in the heart and thereby cause arrhythmias by way of electricity upon electricity influencing that pacemaker cell of the heart. So whenever you have injury, tissue injury, which again could be from heat, that's thermal, or it could be from electricity, which could damage cells and tissues. And of course, electrical burn, again, can involve both thermal and electrical activity. So in either case, you've got damage, which leads to inflammation. And as you know, inflammation leads to vessel permeability and fluid loss into tissues, edema, and a lower circulating volume. So, cardiovascularly speaking, that's, you know, of course, the cardiovascular system includes the blood vessels of the body. And so now if we have decreased blood pressure, then that's a cardiovascular disruption. And the third, we've got fluid and light imbalances, and we're going to talk more about that repeatedly throughout this unit. You could have renal failure, and then there's a kind of a wild card in terms of your lights could go any which direction with renal failure. And also with cell lysis, you get the release of potassium into the bloodstream, thereby raising potassium levels. And anytime you have potassium levels getting too high, then you have the chance for cardiac arrhythmias. Of course, just kind of a fourth thing that adds on to this, if you have like decreased perfusion to tissues, you could have acidosis, as you know from previous units. And when you have acidosis, your hydrogen moves into your cell and your potassium gets kicked out. There's another reason why potassium could be high. So there's a couple reasons for letter C here why potassium might be high. And as you know, a high potassium level influences contractility and could cause some arrhythmias. Finally, question 4, the etiology of acute renal failure secondary to an electrical burn. So we kind of talked about this already, but we'll go into it again. So whenever you have muscle damage, any muscle damage, myoglobin is released. So whether it's thermal or whether it's from electrical injury, you could have large amounts of muscle damage, releasing large amounts of myoglobin. This gets caught up in the renal tubules, as we've talked about in other units, and this causes acute renal failure. If you're lucky enough to get it early enough, you can flush this out with IV solution before you have some kind of intrarenal failure or permanent damage.